So welcome to the second hour of Mindshifters Radio. Today is Tuesday, February the 4th, 2025, and we're glad that you're with us today on Needle. And I'll just give you a quick update before I hand the phone over to Michael. Ryan had gone to Vanderbilt for a recheck post-operative, and he had had some swelling behind his ear, and they tested it, and it was cerebral spinal fluid. So they admitted him last night, and he is scheduled just as we speak, 12 o'clock Central Time, 1 o'clock Eastern Time. And I just got a text, said they just a shunt going from his head down to his abdomen. And it's going to be about a 3-hour process. So if all goes well, hopefully he will come home tomorrow. Well, the 3 hours is including putting him to sleep and doing the procedure and then waking him up and everything. So hold the space. It's like, here we go again. Hopefully this will be the last time, and this is supposed to be a permanent fix. And they'll hopefully come home tomorrow. And Michael and I have been keeping Aria busy and seeing that she gets to school and does her homework and all of her activities. So she's been a wonderful distraction. And I'm going to hand this over to Michael. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Gerhard, and welcome everybody. Delighted that you're here with us, and we get to move to the next level of this conversation about first-century Aramaic forgiveness. Glad you're here, Lane. And if anyone has any questions before I start into the next level of material we were working on yesterday, now would be the time to push the call button from within the Needle app. If you've accessed the show from the link that was sent to you via text, then please, instead of listening on the link, you're listening on a web page where you can't interact with us. You can hear the show, of course. But if you download and open the Needle app and search for Mindshifters Radio, select us as a favorite, then you'll get a notice. And when you open the app, then you can talk to us back and forth. You can write in the chat room and have a conversation with us. So if you've got a thought for us, if you need support, let's start off with that and push that call button and let's say hello. And we'll give a minute to just see if anybody raises a hand. And if not, then I'm going to jump into the physics of disease. And I'm going to look at the next level at how this process of creation works. So one of the things we talked about yesterday was that the cause of all disease is known. And it isn't that some bug out there has gotten into your body and is going to destroy you. The germ theory of disease is an absolutely absurd way to understand the disease process. Not that the germ isn't involved, but the belief that the germ is the cause is the problem. And we can easily understand that. Let's imagine that I have a 1-acre lawn out here in front of my house. And on that 1-acre lawn, I rope off a square foot on one corner of the lawn and another square foot at the opposite corner of that acre. And I do a count. I do a count of how many bugs and how many flies and fleas and creepy crawly things there are on this square foot compared to the other square foot, and they're probably going to be pretty similar. Let's imagine that it's a nice warm day, it's body temperature, 98.6 degrees, and I put a dead rabbit on one of those marked off squares on my acre of land. And let's leave it there for a couple of days, and I'll come back. And I'm going to do a count of the number of bugs and buzzards and creepy crawly things on each square foot once again. Now, absolutely 100% of the time, the count is going to be up on just one of those 2 square feet, and it's going to be the one with the decaying tissue. Now, believing that the decaying tissue is decaying because of the elevated bug count is absurd. Why did the bugs, the buzzards, the creepy crawly things go there? Well, there's a thing called reducer organisms in the creation. Wherever things are decaying, a reducer organism is structured into the system to remove the decaying, dissolving, decrepit tissue structure. Now, I don't care whether it's in the micro realm, as in, bacteria and viruses, or whether you're talking about being out in the jungle. If I go out and I take a look at the lion does not go to the middle of the water buffalo herd, look for the biggest, toughest, most enraged buffalo and try to take it down. What does it do? The lion is a reducer organism. It cleans up, it calls the herd of the weak and the dying, the decaying. Well, the bugs and the buzzards are no different. So offering that the germ theory of disease is a fallacy. And if you ascribe the disease process to the bugs and the buzzards, and there's a poison out there killing your rabbits, you're going to end up with a lot of dead rabbits and you're not going to get anywhere. When you understand what's causing the disease, then you start working on the cause level. Doesn't mean that if there's a disease process happening and it's led to an increased count of bugs and buzzards, that you might want to do something to control the count of bugs and buzzards. You get an excess of, let's say, bacteria running around in your throat because the tissue's weakening. There's something you don't want to say. You cut off energy there. You cut off breath there. It doesn't mean don't take some oregano to kill off the excessive count to support you in your healing process as you do the work of what's offending the tissue structure. You do all of the above, but make sure that you understand where cause lies. So I want to look into the physics of cause. So disease is not an entity that enters us and attacks us. It's a result of engaging in energies that never belonged in our human form. Remember, in Aramaic, that word sin, an archery term, simply means off the mark. If I fire at the target and I miss the bullseye, the scorekeeper yells, sin, you're off the mark. That's all that word means. And if I engage in an energy that is off the mark, then wherever that energy lands in tissue is going to begin the deterioration of the tissue and lead to the disease condition of that tissue. So if I carry in me generations and generations and generations of energies that are off the mark, let's say I was raised in a family with hostility and fear and rage and guilt and, churchianity that pounded on the guilt trip and fear of sin, and I just engaged in a whole lot of disintegrative energies. And there is and never will be a magic pill that gets rid of all of those energies for us. The way you will get rid of those energetic patterns from your family system, from your physiology, from your bloodline, from your generations, is to develop the skills and do the work of cleaning up your own energy system. So if you're interested in being free of what you've been carrying around probably for generations, it's going to take some time, significant time, to engage in the tools to do that. Remember we talked yesterday about Yeshua saying, hey, the gate's really narrow. Not many people are going to find it. These tools are only for those who are ready to own the fact that they're creators and give up their infantile belief in victimhood, blame, and the false need for defensiveness and rage and convincing the world that everybody else is the problem in their lives. you will notice, one of my favorite tongue-in-cheek lines, if you've been through a particular painful reality 87 different times with 42 different people, you're the only one that was there every time. When you realize that, then if there are self-destructive energies of fear and blame and rage, its cousins, grief and loss, as you start to undo the brainwash of the fear that we talked about yesterday, then and only then, peeling off the layers of interfering or sin energy is going to leave just one thing left. And that's going to be the truth of who you are as a human being. And your mind will only prompt you to behaviors that are in alignment with what you see as the end result of your world and your life. Remember, again, in the scriptures they talked about, for a lack of vision, my people perish. It's got to start there at vision. And vision isn't sight. They're two different things. We have vision centers all over the country. No, they're not vision centers. Vision is what is in your highest capacity or your lowest capacity to guide your perceptual mind and send you in a particular direction. Now, if in fact we are human beings literally created of the active presence of love, then opening the pathways in our physiology for that love to flow, I would offer, is the very definition of human life. Human life is love flowing through a cell. So the vision I suggest one engage in is one that asks support in letting all of the pathways for love to be opened in me. Life is love moving through me. Empower me to consciously become aware of any pain energy, any sin set by myself or generations literally in bone. And it takes time to release, time to heal, and it takes grand willingness to move through those layers. And if you don't know what I mean by set in bone, just pay attention to your mind energy, that is your thoughts, the next time you clench your jaw. Pay attention the next time your gut tightens or your fist tightens. How much suffering, how much clenching in the last 4, 10, or 30 generations of your bloodline. In the ancient Aramaic, when they said the quote unquote sins, that is simply the energies that are off the mark of the fathers, and of course mothers, are passed, yea, unto 3 and 4 generations. And what that passage ends up with is statement, and here's the Creator speaking to us as human beings. It says, it's passed on to 3 and 4 generations, yes, of those who hate me. So here's the Creator, the originator, the omnipresence of love, saying, if not hate in a love-hate relationship, but if you're separated from the activity of my mind, which you in your scriptures have called the Christ mind, if you're separated from that, then the generational patterns stored in your tissue structure are all that you have to rely on. So if you go back, do the numbers, do the math. Numbers add up really quickly. Go back 30 generations. That's over 1.6 billion people in your bloodline. And the actions and unresolved issues, the mind energy of those generations is stored right down into our genes. And when that's stimulated, it literally, that energetic pattern from within the genes raises up and becomes the root of the constructs of our mind that we call perception. What do you suppose is in the last 1 point, just looking at your own life? Let's take just 3 lives in your awareness, your mother, your father, and yourself. What have the three of you been through? What remains unresolved? What do you suppose remains unresolved in 30 generations? That is 1.6 billion of your ancestors. What has been locked in bone? And are you open and willing to embrace? Are you willing to uncover and unlock those energetic patterns? Which means you're going to get to feel the effect of it. Probably one of the biggest reasons why people don't want to do the work is that they don't want to deal with what's going on inside of them. So can you, to yourself, really, truly, honestly say, yes, I'm willing to open every shuttered jaw, every gut, every fist, every breath held in my bloodline, so that the pathways of power of my true nature, all embracing love, and the presence of that love are opened in me. Are you willing to go there? Because the purpose of first century Aramaic forgiveness process is to empower us to do that. There's the gateway that hasn't been found. And I'll say that in 50 years of researching and working with these tools, there are only two places that I've found the exact and specific how to, what the gateway is that Yeshua talked about that said was so narrow that so few would find. Two places I found it, and it's been on the planet for 2,000 years. One of them you have to go back to the original Aramaic language and teachings of Yeshua, and the other is in A Course in Miracles. There's nowhere else on the planet that I know that it exists. That's how narrow the gate is. And I'll offer that even though it's in the Course in Miracles, and I've worked with thousands of Course in Miracles students over the years, I've never found one person who knows how to forgive or what the word really means. That's how narrow the gate is. And I had worked with the Course for some time before I found it in the Aramaic, and then when it became clarified from the Aramaic, that's when I started to understand it from the Course. It's important to understand, and part of your vision, that love is a noun, a word that describes a state of being that you can, with practice, maintain no matter what anybody else does, no matter the degrading unconscious content from within your physiology that overrides your true nature, that overrides the truth of the love that you are. With practice, that can be maintained. And it is the maintenance of that active presence of love that is the master solvent that dissolves all untoward energies that we hold on to, all energies that would be described with the Aramaic word sin, energies that are off the mark. Now, if you mistakenly believe that love is a verb, something you're going to do to me or you're going to give to her or him or somebody else, as our culture misleads us into thinking, then we're working to achieve the impossible. And you can only align your creative energies, words, if the definition of that word is accurate. Because words engage a frequency in you. And so if you're striving to bring love present and you believe love is a verb, something you want to do, you're energetically out of alignment. Words engage frequencies in the mind. Our definitions have to be correct if we're going to follow a set of instructions for how to achieve a particular result. And of course, if you have any question as to whether or not the truth about us as human beings is love, just hold a newborn. And one of the deepest core misunderstandings of the writings from the world's most famous textbook on living is love, the most famous textbook on physics, physiology, psychology, cognitive science, and genetics, comes from a book. Again, here's how narrow the gate is. Almost no one knows that that's what that textbook is about. They've been fooled into thinking it's a religious text. If you go to the opening words in the book of John, it doesn't say in the beginning was the Word and the Word became flesh. It says in the beginning was the mind energy and the mind energy became flesh. And those words inform us of the power that we have over our lives, over our body, and literally over our chemistry with the conscious use of our minds and the proper use of words. Now, Greek translations of those words say in the beginning was the Word. And that's not what it says in Aramaic. Why is it so important to recognize the difference between the translation, the Greek translation of it's a word, or it's mind energy? Well, again, let's look at the physics of it. There's a really well-known, preeminent physicist, astronomer, and mathematician whose name is Sir James Jeans. Here's what he says. Today, there is a wide measure of agreement on which the physical side of science approaches almost unanimity, that the stream of knowledge is heading toward a non-mechanical reality. Now, we come out of the past so-called science, and so much of it's mechanistic, mechanical reality. And there's only matter in the universe. But what are the physicists discovering? Here's what Jeans says. He says, the universe begins to look more like a great thought. What would a great thought be but a state of organized mind energy? So it begins to look more like a great thought than a great machine. Mind no longer, he says, appears to be an accidental intruder into the realm of matter. We're beginning to suspect, and Yeshua knew this 2,000 years ago, that we ought rather to hail it as a creator and governor of the realm of matter. Oh, what's the matter? Oh, somebody's got a physical disease. There is no physical disease because there is no physical. Physical is an appearance made up by the mind. We're going to, walk into that, move deeper and deeper into that. Now, isn't it interesting that here's one of the preeminent physicists in the world today, and he's agreeing with the core teachings of a lowly carpenter from 2,000 years ago. Let's see if anybody else agrees. Let's listen to Albert Einstein. Here's what he says. On such things as matter, we have been all wrong. What we have heretofore called matter is energy. Energy whose vibrations have been so lowered as to be perceptible to the senses. There is no matter. So now what Einstein is saying, so Jeans is saying mind energy, Yeshua is saying mind energy. Einstein is saying we've got energy reduced in its rate of vibration. Well, what is it that's behind that? Let's listen to Nikola Tesla. Now, Tesla's responsible for the radio, the world of television, electricity, electrical transmission. That was all Nikola Tesla's work. And here's what he says. The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in one decade than all the previous centuries of its existence. Guess what? That phrase, that statement applies to healing as well. People say, well, I don't want to get into this physics stuff, Michael. I just want to get on with my life. And I got this person that's a problem in my life that always makes me feel bad. So what do I do about that? Understand the physics of your own physiology, and you will learn more in a year than you've learned in your whole life. So these statements from Einstein, from Yeshua, from James Jeans are informing us of the power we have over our lives, over our bodies, over our literal chemistry by the conscious use of our minds. Let's drill down one extra level. Go and check out on YouTube almost any of the videos of Bruce Lipton, cell biologist. Let me just read a few paragraphs of something that he's written that just goes right to the core of what we're talking about. So this is a cell biologist working in the lab, medical school teacher, and bringing forward just new levels of understanding. He read my book about 22 or 23 years ago, by the way. Quantum physicist discovered that physical atoms are made of vortices of energy that are constantly spinning and vibrating. Each atom is like a wobbly spinning top that radiates energy. Each atom is like a wobbly spin. In order for you to think a thought, what do you suppose happens? You have to set up a resonance in brain cells. The energetic patterns held in brain cells have to begin to move. That's what thinking is. And so here he's saying it's like a spinning top that radiates energy. This is how we influence the world around us. He goes on to say, because each atom has its own specific energy signature or wobble. What is he saying there? He's saying every thought has a different frequency. Every thought is a frequency that will produce a different result in the world of what we call matter. So each atom has its own specific energy signature or wobble. It's assemblies of atoms or molecules, and they collectively radiate their identifying energy patterns. So every material structure in the universe, including you and I, radiates a unique energy signature. And every thought you think sets up a field, an energy signature. And let's see what happens to it in the world of so-called matter. So Lipton goes on to say, if it were theoretically possible to observe the composition of an actual atom with a microscope, what would we see? Imagine a swirling dust devil cutting across the desert floor. Now, remove the sand and the dirt from the funnel cloud. What you have is an invisible, tornado-like vortex. A number of infinitesimally small dust devil-like energy vortices called quarks and photons collectively make up the structure of what we call the atom. From far away, the atom would likely appear as a blurry sphere. As its structure came nearer to focus, the atom would become less clear and less distinct. As the surface of the atom draws near, it would disappear. You would see nothing. In fact, as you focused through the entire structure of the atom, all you would observe is a physical void. The atom has no physical structure. The emperor, he says, has no clothes. Remember the atomic models that you studied in school? He says the ones with the marbles and the wall bearings going around like a solar system. Put that picture beside the physical structure of the atom discovered by quantum physicists. Atoms are made of invisible energy, not tangible matter. There is no matter. Our entire world, remember Einstein said, is made up of succeedingly smaller patterns of vibratory fields, nested one within another within another. So in our world, material substance or matter appears, quote unquote, out of thin air. A little weird when you think about it, he says. Here you're holding a physical book in your hands, imagine. And if you're focused on the book's material substance with an atomic microscope, you'd see that you're holding absolutely nothing. As it turns out, we undergraduate biology majors will write about one thing: the quantum universe is mind-bending. That is, everything we've always believed, every thought we've ever had in the world of matter is in error. Now, put the implications of that into the opening words of the book of John. In the beginning was the mind energy, and the mind energy became flesh. If that much of our thinking is wrong, is off base with truth, what's that do to our physiology if that's what's literally becoming the chemistry, what we call chemistry, and the material substance of our form? Remember, Bruce Lipton discovered in the lab, you think a thought. And all of a sudden, in a space where there was nothing or appeared to be nothing, there is a molecule that appears. That molecule, literally the thought, being reduced in its rate of vibration, comes into the sphere of our senses, and we go, oh, this just appeared out of nowhere. Well, no, it didn't. It just changed frequency from a higher form, where if you have charge of your own mind, you are in charge of what frequencies become integrated into your form. And if there are frequencies that have been integrated into your form from the past generations that don't belong there, energies that are sin are off the mark, then you're going to do the work of removing them so that you remove the influence of 1.6 billion people in your generational bloodline that have produced the parts of your life today that are unconscious. So he calls it the now you see it, now you don't nature of quantum physics. Matter can simultaneously be defined as a solid particle and as an immaterial force or a wave. When scientists study the physical properties of atoms, such as mass and weight, they look and act like physical matter. Now here's a mind bender. However, when the same atoms are described in terms of voltage potentials and wavelengths, they exhibit the qualities and properties of energy. Now, you've probably heard in the past of a thing called the observer effect. Now we're getting down to a deeper level of understanding of Yeshua's words. In the beginning was the mind energy, and the mind energy became flesh. The fact that energy and matter are one and the same is precisely what Einstein recognized when he concluded E equals mc squared, his famous equation. Simply stated, this equation reveals that energy equals matter multiplied by the speed of light squared. In other words, energy is being organized into an expression of form. And, you know, if you've got the eyes to see and the ears to hear, everything that I've been reading about this science, it sounds like it's kind of like, what's that got to do with me where I live and I've got a conflict with the person sitting across from me? If you got the eyes to see and the ears to hear, what they're describing here is your creatorship. It's the power that you have to create your life, or if you choose to forgive, remove certain patterns to uncreate what has happened in your life. So Einstein, Bruce Lipton goes on to say, revealed that we do not live in a universe with discrete physical objects separated by dead space. The universe is one indivisible dynamic whole in which energy and matter are so deeply entangled, it is impossible to consider them as independent elements. So when you say, what's the matter, you know, and your mind, if you've been trained into the mind energy of the one world universal religion of blame, the mind energy that moves in you and impacts your physiology becomes something about blaming someone else. And when you blame someone else, you dissociate from the very energy that you're saying you're ready to be finished with it. You don't want to feel the effects of this anymore. You don't want this impact in your life anymore. So ultimately, all conversation, all thoughts of blame have to be removed because they create physiological states of disease. And they are at the very root of denying our creatorship. And if you create something and then play the game, pretending that you didn't create it, now you're really in trouble. Max Planck, here's a guy who got the Nobel Prize in Physics for discovering the atom. Here's what Max said. Back about 15 years ago, Ginny and I got to sleep in his bedroom where all of his experimental stuff was. We were at a conference celebrating his 100th birthday. It was pretty awesome. But here's what Max Planck said. In all my research, I have never come across matter. To me, the term matter implies a bundle of energy which is given form by an intelligent spirit. Now, if our spirit is unconscious, the only intelligence is there is the intelligence that figured out in the past that somebody else was to blame for what's going on in our lives. Again, the guy who got the Nobel Prize in Physics says, the term matter implies a bundle of energy which is given form by an intelligent spirit. He goes on to say, as a man who's devoted his whole life to the most clear-headed science, to the study of matter, I can tell you, as a result of my research about atoms, this much. There is no matter as such. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force. Remember, Ruka Dekucha is an elemental force. So all matter originates, here's Max Planck, and exists only by virtue of a force which brings the particles of an atom to vibration and holds this most minute solar system of the atom together. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is a matrix of all matter. Again, he's telling us about our creatorship. And when we become acquainted with that, we have the opportunity to start to change the whole creative process. However, at this point, let's take a look at Carl Jung, who comes in and says this. And remember that denial is a way to reject information and awareness of the impact of that information. So Carl Jung says, whatever is rejected from the self appears through blame in the world called perception as an event. We meet ourselves, and we could add in our own energetic projections on others, time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life. Until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct our lives, and we will call it fate. And everything that appears to irritate or upset us about others can lead to understanding ourselves and the healing process. Now, it's interesting, you look at all of that science, and then in our modern world, Einstein is the one who brings the spiritual faculties into play here and very clearly states it. When he says, a human being is a part of the whole, called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings, as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion, Einstein says, is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison. This is exactly what forgiveness does. To free ourselves from this perceptual prison, and then he brings in compassion here, he says, by widening our circle of compassion. And I'd offer that compassion is a corollary word to love. There are different sides of exactly the same coin. If you hold a newborn and you touch into the essence of that newborn, another word to describe that newborn energy, that presence of love, is compassion. And what Einstein is saying as a very mature scientist is you've got to bring the presence of love to your life. And he goes further than that, is he says, our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion, that is an aspect of love, to embrace all living creature and the whole of nature in its beauty. He goes on to say, nobody, and I would disagree with him here, probably he says nobody because he hasn't fulfilled it yet. Not saying that I have, but nobody is able to achieve this completely, but the striving for such an achievement is in itself a part of the liberation and foundation of inner security. In other words, there's a work to be done, and to bring this understanding into the realm of healing and disease requires the surrender of generations and generations and generations of false mind energy that literally becomes persistent constructs in our mind that perhaps need to be forgiven 1,000 times in order to weaken those fields, in order to dissolve those fields sufficiently that the insanity disappears. Pardon me, Niels Bohr, you're right, honey, thank you. So the place where we went and we got to sleep in this man's room with all of his lab stuff was actually Niels Bohr. Jeannie reminds me of that when I go off base. Thank you. So bring this understanding of the realm of healing means that all kinds of things that have literally solidified as our physiology have to be removed. Ideas with which we unconsciously create outcomes in our lives, especially the many false ideas we've been taught about forgiveness itself. True healing is not about belief, but about the individual thoughts that make up the thing we call belief. Somebody says, "Oh, I have this belief, and I'm gonna get rid of that belief, or I'm not gonna believe that anymore." But in order to have a structure, a construct in your mind that's called a belief, there perhaps, especially if there is pain associated with that belief, there are perhaps 1,000 different thought disorders that go into creating that whole structure in the mind. And so it isn't a matter of, oh, well, I'm just going to get rid of this belief. There might be, in order to weaken that construct of belief in the mind sufficiently, if there are 1,000 thought disorders involved, it might take literally specifically engaging in the forgiveness of 800 of those 1,000 thought disorders and removing those patterns before that construct in the mind collapses. So forgiveness of those thought disorders in turn, because thought has been proven is back of and superior to the world of matter, we now understand that thought is the matter. Changing thoughts changes the structure of the matter that makes up our form, and the energetic influences that radiate out from us and draw people into interplay with us to bring behaviors to us. And I love what Carl Jung says here. He says, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. Now, I would substitute for that word soul in there with Carl Jung would be to avoid facing their own thought disorders, in order to keep the projection up, in order to keep putting that energy into our brain's image of someone else, so we have a structure that informs us that the problem's outside of us rather than inside of us. Richard Feynman addresses that issue. Richard Feynman is a Nobel Prize winning physicist. And he says, we must bend over backwards to criticize ourselves, for we are the easiest ones for us to fool. Now, again, who cares about all this physics? I just want to get on with my life. Your so-called body is a dynamic energy system, a cosmic soup of neuropeptides, which lab research now shows are reflections of condensed thoughts. Check out, you can actually go on YouTube, and I think it's there free. Candace Pert, you heard me mention her before. She was the chief of brain biochemistry and at the clinical neuroscience branch of the National Mental Institute of Health. You can go to YouTube and watch her book or listen to her book, Molecules of Emotion. Candace was just awesome. Genius. She's the one that discovered opiate receptors in the brain. I mean, this one was just amazing. She also loved the forgiveness work. So these neuropeptides, one by one, have to be dissolved in order literally for the what have been described as the energy patterns of molecules that need to be removed. By the way, I've got a note here. If you watch that on YouTube, you can skip forward about the first 3 minutes, kind of just fluff or something really to listen to. But from there on, it's gold. So if one suffers from a thought disorder holding disintegrative mind energy in their forms, that energy, wherever it's stored, will create aberrant chemistry, a disease condition within the cell. Now, remember we talked about the dead rabbit on the 1 square foot of lawn? Why did all the bugs and buzzards go there? Because the decaying tissue will attract the reducer organism. It's no different out there on the lawn than it is in your body. If there is an excess of a bacterial or viral influence, it's because there is an aberrant breakdown of the tissue structure that says, hey, I need a reducer organism here to clean up this mess. So wherever aberrant chemistry exists, it's a result of aberrant mind energy. I love what Deepak Chopra said. He said, to think is to practice brain chemistry. And basically, the Aramaic forgiveness process is a tool for changing the brain chemistry of the past and freeing ourselves from generations of embedded disintegrative mind energy. It's all about removal. Nothing to do with letting anybody else off the hook. Pardon somebody if you wish, but call that what it is. So letting somebody else off the hook for the pain induced by the aberrant chemistry that maybe they've resonated in you is useless in terms of your own physiological, mental, emotional healing. When used properly, what the 1st century Aramaic forgiveness process does is it changes cellular chemistry on the level where we think of chemistry as real. And what happens is, in an instant, mental, physical, and emotional diseases disappear. Now, sometimes those instants take a while to produce. You know, it's not an overnight thing. You know, a lot of people love Willie Nelson and they think of him as an instant overnight success. I used to be in the studio business in Nashville. Willie Nelson kicked around the streets of Nashville living in his car for 17 years before he became an instant overnight success. Some of the major issues in your life as you're working on them might take more than 1 or 2 worksheets. And whenever I notice my mind moving into any form of disintegrative energy, if I'm on guard, if I'm conscious, if I'm awake, then I'll address that disintegrative energy and remove it from my structure. I'll go back to tapping into, rather than getting into it and suffering it and whining about it and crying about it. Stop, breathe, cancel the goal that's driving it, bring the presence of love and breath forward into the tissue, and bring that integrative energy in to strengthen the tissue structure. Fear, hostility, defensiveness are all disintegrative energies relative to the body. Now somebody says, well, but I protect myself with it. No, there's no protection in that. In the long haul, the promise that fear is going to protect you, oh, you need fear or you put your hand in the fire. Excuse me? I have intelligence. I know the fire burns. I don't need to put my hand in the fire. And I don't, or pardon me, if I choose not to put my hand in the fire, I do it because I'm aware. I don't do it because I'm afraid I'm going to get burned. Fear is a fraud. It never produces anything but more of the same disease that it is. It always leads to pain and failure. And I've had people over the years said, well, you know, I used fear real. I know I was in this situation. I had fear, and that motivated me to get going. And, you know, I got out of it. Well, okay. So congratulations. You brought forward a constructive result out of a disintegrative energy. But if you'd been in that same situation where you recognize there needed to be change made, how much faster, how much crisper, how much cleaner, how much more uplifting would have been if your advisor, if the energy fueling your mind at that point had been that of love rather than fear. When one doesn't take responsibility and remove the fear, the tendency is to be inextricably bound and react the same way and repeat the same suffering again and again. And if you want to read about the whole process on a deeper level or watch a video on the whole process, jump on our website, whyagain, whyagain.org/book. You can download the book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again, free in any one of 9 different languages from our website. Or you can go to our YouTube channel. You do that by going to YouTube and typing in Michael Ryce as one word, Michaelryce, and then look for Why Is This Happening to Me Again. There are a couple of different versions of the workshop there. Each one has different points that I focus on, different direction that it goes, so each one is a complement to the other. Watch those, and it will bring a whole different level of understanding together. The thing to remember is that when you think a thought, a neuropeptide literally appears in your body. Neuropeptides are proteins, and each one is unique in structure, and it's a reflection built according to the blueprint created by the thought that formed it. Who is the thinker here? Are you replicating thoughts from the past? And something and somebody else is creating your life. If you are originating the thoughts consciously, then you're stepping into conscious creatorship. Those neuropeptides that come from the past are designed to inform us. If we learn to decode the content of our own minds, and to do that, you have to first of all be responsible for it. You can't be thinking it's all somebody else you're feeling this, and decode the energy behind your feelings, because those energies are going to be hidden in your projections and your constructs of your brain's image of others. And at the same time, each thought is designed to carry a message to the cell itself and direct the cell's function accordingly. Each neuropeptide, that is each thought you think, when it lands on a cell, is integrated into the cell as what we call, if we were inside the cell, watching that neuropeptide land on the receptor site and enter into the cell, we would call what's coming into the cell chemistry. And that would be, if we go back to that description that Bruce Lipton gave us of the vortexes of energy, that's what that becomes. Its ultimate end result is what we call form. Now, the cell has no other apparent means of contact with the outside world, so it's informed accurately or inaccurately by your own thinking. Errant mind energy thoughts become and sustain disease chemistry as long as those energetic patterns are held in the system, and forgiveness is about removing those. And most have been thought that the end result of all those energies moving within us, our perceptions, are a fact. We're looking out there in the world, and the truth is, each bit of mind energy that we have when resonated into activity becomes part of the construct of the mind that we call perception. We're not observing internal or external events. When we're looking at the pictures painted on the inside of our eyeballs, we're looking at internal events. Every perception is a construct out of the mind energy held in one's own cellular structure. And accurate or inaccurate, it's all constructed out of our thoughts. If you want to take a much deeper look at that, I bring him up regularly because it's such an important piece of understanding and he explains it so well. Watch the TED Talk on YouTube of Anil, A-N-I-L, Seth. He takes the whole understanding to a different level. So perception has a quality. Those whose mental constructs are accurate, we say, well, they're pretty smart. Those with poor perceptual acuity, well, not so bright. Accurate thoughts about self, others, and the world, and the understanding of how your creative process works, your creative power, leads to accurate perceptions and intelligent responses. Poor quality and accurate thoughts destroy perception and intelligence. Because when an errant thought is recruited into activity, i.e. by quote unquote cycling it, thinking about it, or resonated to activity by the world, each stored neuropeptide or thought becomes part of the individual's constructed perception. That means that often, especially when one is in fear or hostility, and one's personal reality, the perception, is a construct that is substituted for the actuality of what's going on in the world, we end up in that cycle of why is this happening to me again? It's happening again because the capacity to produce that construct is in you, and the pain that one feels is a result of that energetic pattern moving within us. It's like the Creator put a warning signal in that informs us when we're engaged in a creative process. Remember the quote we've shared several times from CIA's study of intelligence, where they say, bottom line confusion, perception is demonstrably an active rather than a passive process. It constructs rather than records reality. People continuously, according to this CIA research, construct their own version of reality. Remember, you're a part of the whole called universe. You may seem to be limited in time and space, and experiencing yourself as separated from the rest of humanity. You're living in an optical delusion. Forgiveness frees one from this prison, this optical delusion that restricts us to self, 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 self. And again, Einstein just so beautifully brings in the need for the presence of love. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circles of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature and its beauty. And what we're looking to do here is to develop accurate language that describes not the world, not the fact of life, but the tools with which you can directly go and experience the facts of life yourself. The truth of the fact that you are by nature, a creator. And that each neuropeptide that shows up in your structure is a quote unquote physical reflection. That vortex that Bruce Lipton was talking about, it's a physical reflection of the thought engaged and produces an energy or a result called feelings, a warning signal. Each thought you engage in communicates and inserts an energy, a message into your own cellular structure. The messages received deeply impact the activity of every cell, including changing the action of and the rewriting of our genes. The mechanism that we're talking about here is the mechanism that keeps the cell, or is designed to keep the cell informed about the actual world. You're a community of trillions of cells. And unfortunately, this relatively new skill called perception interrupts that process by inserting, in place of the actual world, a construct, made up world that's a projection of unresolved past experiences held in the cellular structure or the body as memory, and is constructed using past thoughts from those memories. The false inserted, instead of awareness based in truth and love being the root of perception, is messaged into appearing, the past appearing like the present, an internal construct looking like an external picture. And the process that goes on inside of most people tricks them into believing that their realities are true about the world when they're only true about the perceiving mind. And an invitation to go inside of ourselves, to collapse perception, which is what forgiveness does, and go inside of ourselves and clean up our own minds. So breathing with you, appreciating the fact that you're with us today, and that hour has gone by quickly. Didn't even get a hand up. But anyway, delighted to have you joining us. Create the best year yet of your eternal life. It's an awesome gift to give the world. By the way, if you want to do Quantum Still Point, March 2nd through the 7th, looks like we're going to be renting a house here in Bristol. And if you're ready to do another level of work, put it on your calendar. Let me